Hands up. Why are you driving this car?
Driving? Officer, I own this car. What is the problem?
You fit the description of a suspect driving a car matching this make and color.
That's impossible. My registration and ID are in my jacket.
Don't reach. Keep your hands where I can see them.
I'm trying to comply, but you need to check the plate.
I am the police chief.
I don't care who you are.
Officer Daniel Fisher had been with the Phoenix Police Department for 16 years. In those 16 years, he'd accumulated 33 formal complaints. 28 of them involved black men he'd pulled over without legitimate traffic violations in affluent areas of the city. A black executive in a Tesla was stopped for suspicious driving pattern. A black surgeon in a BMW was detained for improper lane change that dashcam footage later disproved. A black attorney driving from court was searched for drugs during a routine stop with no violation. A black businessman was handcuffed for matching a description that was never verified. A black professor was arrested for resisting when he asked for the reason for the stop. A black engineer in a Mercedes was pulled over for erratic driving when he was going the speed limit. A black accountant was detained for suspicious vehicle operation with no articulated violation. Every complaint ended the same way. Internal affairs review that cleared him, use of force justification that protected him, bias training he attended but dismissed, union grievances that blocked discipline, written warnings that accumulated in a file nobody acted on. One Thursday afternoon in Phoenix, his 16-year pattern of pretextual stops targeting black men in expensive cars finally confronted someone who didn't just know the law, someone who ran an entire police department, who commanded 200 officers, who reported directly to the mayor, who had authority that made Fisher look like exactly what he was, a rogue officer who'd been protected for far too long. That confrontation would end Fisher's career, cost the city $9 million, create a regional scandal, and expose a department that had ignored 33 complaints over 16 years. Chief Robert Thompson, a 51-year-old police chief from a neighboring jurisdiction, was driving through Scottsdale after a regional law enforcement conference when he saw flashing lights behind him. His police credentials were in his wallet, his badge in the center console, his conference materials in his briefcase. No traffic violation, no erratic driving, no legitimate reason for the stop, just a police chief driving through an upscale area. But Officer Fisher saw him through a lens so warped by racial assumptions that he couldn't process a black man in a nice car as anything other than suspicious, certainly not as a fellow law enforcement officer, and definitely not as someone who outranked him by multiple levels, and whose arrest would become a case study in racial profiling within law enforcement. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button. These stories need attention. Phoenix, Arizona. Scottsdale, one of the wealthiest areas in the state, with luxury resorts, upscale shopping, fine dining, and affluent residents. The area was known for expensive cars, high-end boutiques, and heavy police presence. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Afternoon, temperature 86 degrees, clear skies. Traffic was moderate as the workday wound down. Chief Robert Thompson had been in law enforcement for 29 years, the last 9 as chief of police in Tempe, a city of 190,000 residents adjacent to Phoenix. He'd started as a patrol officer in Tucson, worked his way up through the ranks. Detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief, then chief. He'd graduated from Arizona State University, then earned his master's degree in criminal justice administration from Northern Arizona University. He'd completed the FBI National Academy, the prestigious training program for top law enforcement executives. He'd led his department through major reforms, reduced crime rates by 23%, improved community relations significantly, implemented comprehensive body camera programs, and de-escalation training that became models for other departments. He'd testified before the Arizona legislature on police reform multiple times, served on statewide law enforcement committees, and been recognized by the governor for excellence in public safety. He'd received the Arizona Association of Chiefs of Police's Chief of the Year award twice. He supervised 200 officers, managed a $58 million budget, and reported to a city council and mayor who valued his progressive leadership. He was respected across the state as a reform-minded chief who believed in constitutional policing and community trust. That afternoon, Chief Thompson had attended a regional police chiefs conference in Phoenix, a quarterly meeting where law enforcement executives from across Arizona discussed best practices, shared intelligence, and coordinated on regional issues. He'd presented on his department's success in reducing use of force incidents by 47% through better training and accountability measures. After the conference, he'd driven through Scottsdale on his way back to Tempe, taking a scenic route. He was obeying all traffic laws, driving his personal Cadillac Escalade, wearing casual clothes after changing out of his uniform. He was listening to a police accountability podcast when he noticed a Phoenix PD patrol car following him for several blocks. He checked his speed, 33 in a 35 mph zone. He'd signaled every turn. He'd stopped completely at stop signs. Then the lights came on. Do you think officers should state violations immediately during traffic stops? Drop your answer below. Officer Daniel Fisher had those 33 complaints over 16 years. 28 involved black men in nice cars in wealthy neighborhoods. A pattern so undeniable it should have ended his career a decade ago. But Phoenix PD treated each complaint in isolation, never acknowledging the systematic bias staring them in the face. Fisher's supervisors had recommended termination 3 times over 8 years. Internal Affairs had flagged him as high risk multiple times. Community groups had protested his continued employment. Yet he remained on patrol because the police union had successfully blocked any serious discipline, arguing that Fisher's stops were within policy guidelines and that he was being targeted for aggressive policing. His personnel file contained documentation of racial bias complaints dating back to his 2nd year on the force, yet he remained on patrol with full arrest authority. That afternoon, Fisher was patrolling Scottsdale when he saw a black man driving a Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. No traffic violation occurred, but Fisher followed him for 7 blocks, looking for any reason to justify a stop. When none materialized, he pulled him over anyway, planning to claim suspicious driving behavior in his report, a tactic he'd used successfully dozens of times before. Chief Thompson pulled over carefully, put his car in park, turned off the engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and took a deep breath. He'd trained hundreds of officers on traffic stops. He knew the procedure. He knew the risks. He'd investigated officer-involved shootings. He'd reviewed dashcam footage of stops gone wrong. He'd testified at trials. He kept his hands visible and waited. Fisher approached the driver's window with his hand already on his weapon, his body language aggressive, his tone immediately hostile. "Pull over immediately." Chief Thompson spoke calmly and professionally. "Officer, I've pulled over. What's the violation?" "License and registration. Don't ask questions." The chief's training kicked in, but so did his frustration. "Officer, I have a right to know why I'm being stopped. I'm asking respectfully. What traffic violation did I commit?" Fisher's hand moved closer to his weapon. "Step out of the vehicle right now." "I'm going to need a reason for this stop first. I was traveling below the speed limit. I signaled all turns. I stopped at all stop signs. What is the legal basis for this traffic stop?" "You're being difficult. That's obstruction." Chief Thompson remained calm, knowing every word mattered. "Officer, I'm not being difficult. I'm exercising my constitutional rights. I'm Chief Robert Thompson, Tempe Police Department. My credentials are in my wallet. My badge is in the center console. I'm a police chief. I attended a regional chiefs conference in Phoenix today. I'm driving home to Tempe. I'm going to slowly reach for my credentials. I'm armed. My service weapon is in the console beside my badge." "Should police chiefs be arrested during traffic stops?" "Let me know what you think." Fisher sneered, his contempt visible. "Yeah, and I'm the mayor. Everyone's a cop when they get pulled over. Step out of the vehicle right now or you're going to jail." "I'm serious, officer. I'm the chief of police in Tempe. Badge number 1. You can verify through dispatch. Call your supervisor. I'm a sitting police chief. I presented at the conference today on use of force reduction. I can give you the name of your chief who was there." "Last one. Warning. Out of the car or I'm pulling you out." Chief Thompson pulled out his phone with one hand while keeping the other on the wheel. "I'm activating my recording. Officer Fisher, badge number unclear, Phoenix Police Department, has pulled me over without stating a traffic violation. I've identified myself as Chief Robert Thompson, Tempe PD. I'm a police chief being detained without legal basis." Fisher opened the door forcefully. "You're under arrest for obstruction, resisting arrest, and impersonating a law enforcement officer." "Impersonating? I am a law enforcement officer. I'm a police chief. This is a catastrophic mistake, Officer Fisher." Fisher grabbed the chief's arm and pulled him out of the vehicle roughly. Chief Thompson didn't resist physically, but spoke clearly and firmly for his recording and for motorists slowing to watch. "I am not resisting. I am complying. I am Chief Robert Thompson, Tempe Police Department. I command 200 officers. I report to the mayor of Tempe. I attended a police chief's conference today where I presented on use of force reduction. I am being unlawfully arrested by Phoenix PD Officer Fisher. I have committed no traffic violation, no crime, no obstruction. This is a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights and an assault on a fellow law enforcement officer. I'm recording this interaction." Motorists were stopping now, pulling out phones. "That's wrong," one shouted. "He said he's a police chief." Another yelled. Fisher handcuffed Chief Thompson, the metal tight on his wrists, the same wrists that had shaken the governor's hand at award ceremonies multiple times. He walked him toward the patrol car while the chief continued documenting every detail in a calm, authoritative voice. "I am a 29-year law enforcement veteran. I am a police chief. I run a 200-officer department. I was driving home from a professional conference where I presented to other chiefs, including Phoenix PD's chief. Officer Fisher has arrested me for driving while black in Scottsdale. I have witnesses. I have video evidence. The time is 4:47 p.m. I am being placed in patrol unit number unclear. My credentials are in my wallet. My badge is in my vehicle. This will be a career-ending mistake for this officer." Fisher placed him in the back of the patrol car roughly, pushing his head down harder than necessary, a move the chief had personally banned in his own department as unnecessarily aggressive and dangerous. Through the window, Chief Thompson could see his Escalade with the door open, his police badge visible in the center console where he'd told Fisher it would be, his conference materials scattered on the seat. He was mentally cataloging every violation: unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion, false arrest without probable cause, assault on a law enforcement officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, excessive force with the handcuffs, failure to verify credentials when explicitly offered, and the mounting implications of arresting a municipal police chief from a neighboring jurisdiction. The drive to the station took 26 minutes through Phoenix traffic. Chief Thompson spent every minute of it thinking about his officers, his department, the press conference he'd have to give, the lawsuit he'd have to file, the reforms this incident would force not just in Phoenix, but potentially across Arizona and beyond. They arrived at Phoenix PD's Scottsdale Division headquarters. Fisher walked him inside, still handcuffed, past a desk sergeant who looked up and immediately froze, his face going pale with recognition. "Fisher, what? Chief Thompson? Is that you?" The chief spoke before Fisher could. "Sergeant, I'm Chief Robert Thompson, Tempe Police Department. I attended the Regional Chiefs Conference in Phoenix today. I presented on use of force reduction. I was driving home when Officer Fisher pulled me over without a traffic violation. I identified myself as a police chief. He arrested me for impersonation. My credentials are in my wallet. My badge is in my vehicle. I need you to contact Phoenix Police Chief Rodriguez immediately and Tempe Mayor Harrison. This is a code blue situation." The desk sergeant was already reaching for the phone, his hands shaking. "Chief Thompson, I recognize you from the conference. You presented this afternoon. I was there. Oh my God. Fisher, what have you done?" Fisher still didn't grasp the magnitude. He claims he's a police chief, but he was driving suspiciously and... He is a police chief. I saw him present 3 hours ago. Chief Rodriguez was sitting in the front row. You arrested the Tempe police chief. The sergeant was dialing Phoenix Chief Rodriguez's direct line, his voice panicked. "Chief, we have an emergency situation. One of our officers just arrested Chief Thompson from Tempe." "Yes, sir? Chief Robert Thompson. He's in handcuffs right now in our station." "Yes, sir." "Officer Fisher." "I don't know, sir. No traffic violation that I can determine." "Yes, sir. I'll find out immediately, sir." Within minutes, the situation exploded into a full crisis. Phoenix Police Chief Rodriguez was on the phone, his voice audible through the receiver even from across the room, demanding to know how one of his officers had arrested a fellow police chief. Within 10 minutes, Chief Rodriguez arrived at the station personally, his face showing a mixture of fury and mortification. Within 15 minutes, the Phoenix mayor's office had been notified. Within 20 minutes, the Tempe mayor was calling. Within 30 minutes, every police chief who'd attended the conference that day knew what had happened. Within an hour, the story was breaking regionally with plans for national coverage. Chief Rodriguez approached Chief Thompson, who was still handcuffed in an interview room, and removed the handcuffs himself, his apology profuse and genuine. "Robert, I cannot apologize enough. This is unconscionable. You're being released immediately. This arrest never should have happened. I am personally mortified. You presented at my invitation 3 hours ago." He turned to Fisher, his voice shaking with rage. "Badge and weapon. You're suspended without pay effective immediately, pending termination and potential criminal charges. Do not leave the state. Internal Affairs will want to speak with you. The Maricopa County Attorney will want to speak with you. The FBI may want to speak with you. The Arizona Post Board will want to speak with you. Fisher finally seemed to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Chief, I didn't know. You arrested a police chief, a fellow law enforcement officer from a neighboring jurisdiction. You ignored his credentials. You accused him of impersonation when he presented at our conference today. You've generated 33 complaints in 16 years. You've been flagged by Internal Affairs. Supervisors have recommended your termination 3 times. The union has protected you for years. And now you've arrested a sitting police chief, a reform-minded chief who was literally teaching us about constitutional policing 3 hours ago. Your career is over. Badge, weapon, now. By that evening, the story had exploded across Arizona and was going national. Every major news outlet covered it. A black police chief arrested by a white officer while driving home from a conference. The optics were devastating for Phoenix PD. The Police Chiefs Association of Arizona issued a statement of support for Chief Thompson and condemnation of Phoenix PD. The Arizona Department of Public Safety announced an investigation. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division launched a pattern and practice investigation into Phoenix PD. National civil rights organizations demanded systemic reform. Video from witnesses went viral, showing a man in handcuffs calmly explaining he's a police chief while being arrested. The hashtag Sabanj Chief Thompson trended for days. Law enforcement executives across the country expressed shock and solidarity. Chief Thompson held a press conference the next day, still processing the trauma but maintaining his professional composure. I've been in law enforcement for 29 years. I've been a police chief for 9 years. Yesterday I was arrested for driving while black. Officer Fisher saw a black man in a nice car and assumed crime. He didn't see a colleague. He didn't see a fellow law enforcement officer who'd presented at a conference with his own chief hours earlier. He saw what his biases told him to see. And even when I identified myself as a police chief, with specifics about the conference, offering my credentials, suggesting he verify with dispatch, he didn't believe me. That tells you everything you need to know about the problem we face in law enforcement. Chief Thompson filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit 18 months later against Officer Daniel. Fisher individually, his supervisors who'd ignored 33 complaints, Phoenix PD, the city of Phoenix, and the police union for blocking disciplinary action that could have prevented this. The lawsuit was filed in federal court under 42 U.S.C. Parar of 1983 and included causes of action that were unprecedented in scope. Unlawful traffic stop of a law enforcement official without probable cause or reasonable suspicion, false arrest of a police chief in violation of the Fourth Amendment, false imprisonment of a municipal official, assault and battery on a law enforcement officer and municipal official, deprivation of rights under color of law in violation of 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 242, interference with official duties of a police chief, obstruction of a law enforcement officer, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling and discrimination in violation of the 14th Amendment, intentional infliction of emotional distress on a law enforcement executive, professional humiliation and damage to reputation, deliberate indifference to Fisher's pattern of constitutional violations, despite multiple termination recommendations, failure to train and supervise despite documented complaints and supervisor warnings, municipal liability for maintaining policies that enabled racial profiling, respondeat superior liability for the actions of a rogue officer, and punitive damages for extreme misconduct against a fellow law enforcement officer. The complaint included Fisher's complete disciplinary record, 33 complaints over 16 years, 28 involving black men in nice cars, 3 separate supervisor recommendations for the termination that were blocked by the union, internal affairs flags identifying him as high risk, citizen complaints describing identical patterns of behavior, statistical analysis showing clear racial disparities in his stops, and evidence that Phoenix PD had documented the problem but failed to act due to union pressure. The filing included declarations from other police chiefs who'd been at the conference, expert testimony on constitutional policing and the unique harm of arresting a fellow law enforcement officer, and documentation of the professional harm to Chief Thompson's reputation and the message it sent to communities about police accountability. Phoenix's city attorneys initially tried to mount a defense but quickly realized the case was indefensible and politically catastrophic. Dashboard camera footage from Fisher's patrol car showed no traffic violation whatsoever. Body camera footage showed Chief Thompson complying with all commands, while Fisher escalated unnecessarily and ignored offers to verify his identity. Witnesses confirmed the chief's account. Video evidence from multiple sources existed. Fisher had zero legal basis for the stop and zero probable cause for the arrest. The badge and credentials were exactly where the chief said they'd be. The pattern of complaints showed deliberate indifference, rising to constitutional violations. The involvement of a sitting police chief from a neighboring jurisdiction added unprecedented aggravating factors. Phoenix's own internal affairs reports documented that Fisher should have been terminated years earlier. The union's role in blocking 3 separate termination recommendations created additional liability. The political fallout was immense, with the mayor facing calls for resignation and the police chief's job in jeopardy. The national attention made settlement the only viable option. The city settled 26 months later in what became one of the largest civil rights settlements in Arizona history. $9 million paid to Chief Robert Thompson. The settlement also required Phoenix PD to implement sweeping reforms under federal monitoring, including immediate termination of Officer Fisher with forfeiture of all pension benefits, prohibition on Fisher ever working in law enforcement again anywhere in the United States, mandatory federal oversight of Phoenix PD's traffic stop practices for 5 years, complete revision of stop and frisk policies, automatic investigation triggered by 2 similar complaints within 18 months, body camera and dashboard camera review for every traffic stop with mandatory supervisor approval, elimination of union contract provisions that block discipline for civil rights violations, creation of an independent civilian review board with subpoena power and binding disciplinary authority, publication of all traffic stop data with demographic breakdowns, early warning system for officers with complaint patterns, mandatory training on constitutional policing for all officers, and specific protocols for when officers stop fellow law enforcement officers. Officer Daniel Fisher was terminated 6 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was scathing and comprehensive. Officer Fisher conducted an unlawful traffic stop of Chief Robert Thompson, a sitting police chief from a neighboring jurisdiction, without probable cause, reasonable suspicion, or any articulable traffic violation. He arrested a fellow law enforcement officer for exercising constitutional rights and identifying himself with valid credentials. He ignored clearly stated identification as a police chief, including specific details about a conference both departments participated in that same day. He accused a police chief of impersonation. He used excessive force on a fellow officer. His pattern of similar conduct over 16 years, documented through 33 complaints with 28 involving black men in nice cars, demonstrates a consistent pattern of racial profiling and an inability to serve the public without racial bias. Despite 3 separate supervisor recommendations for termination over 8 years, union intervention prevented appropriate discipline. This termination is effective immediately for cause with forfeiture of all benefits, including pension. Fisher faced federal criminal charges for deprivation of rights under color of law against a law enforcement officer, a felony under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 242 with enhanced penalties for victimizing a fellow police officer. After extensive plea negotiations to avoid trial, he pleaded guilty and received 39 months in federal prison, 5 years of supervised release, and a permanent ban from law enforcement nationwide. His name entered the National Decertification Index with a special flag indicating he'd arrested a fellow police chief. He would never work in law enforcement again anywhere in the United States, and the conviction would follow him for life. Chief Thompson testified before the Arizona legislature and before Congress at historic hearings on police accountability and racial profiling within law enforcement. His testimony was powerful, combining professional expertise with personal trauma. "I'm a police chief. I've dedicated 29 years to law enforcement. I've trained officers. I've supervised departments. I've implemented reforms that reduced use of force incidents by 47%. I've testified about best practices. I've received awards from governors and police associations. I presented at a conference about constitutional policing. 3 hours later, I was arrested for driving while black by an officer who saw my skin color before he saw my badge, before he could even see my badge, because he never gave me the chance to show it despite my repeated offers." He paused, his voice carrying both authority and pain. 33 complaints in 16 years, 28 involving black men in nice cars. 3 separate supervisors recommended termination over 8 years. Internal Affairs flagged him as high risk. The union blocked every attempt at discipline. That's not an anomaly. That's a system designed to protect officers, regardless of their conduct, regardless of the harm they cause, regardless of how many people they violate. Officer Fisher didn't arrest me despite being a police chief. He arrested me because even being a police chief, even having presented at a law enforcement conference that same day, couldn't overcome his assumption that a black man in a nice car doesn't belong. He continued, his testimony becoming a call to action heard across the country. $9 million is what Phoenix taxpayers paid because the system protected a biased officer for 16 years, despite 3 termination recommendations. But money doesn't undo being handcuffed by a fellow officer who refused to believe I was a chief despite overwhelming evidence. It doesn't erase the humiliation of being arrested by someone I outrank while my credentials sat in my car where I said they'd be. It doesn't restore the trust my officers have in me when they see their chief treated like a criminal. And it doesn't prevent the next officer with 33 complaints from doing the same thing to someone without a badge to protect them. Because that's the real tragedy. I had credentials, rank, authority, and resources. I had just presented at a conference with dozens of witnesses who could verify my identity. Most victims don't have any of that. If this can happen to a police chief, imagine what happens to everyone else. Phoenix PD implemented sweeping federally monitored reforms that became a model for departments nationwide and were later incorporated into national police reform legislation. The case became required teaching in police academies across the country as an example of how racial bias can override even the most obvious evidence. A police chief couldn't avoid racial profiling even when identifying himself with specifics, offering credentials and suggesting verification through official channels. Why do departments wait for 33 complaints and ignore 3 termination recommendations instead of acting after 2? Comment your thoughts. This wasn't about one Thursday afternoon in Scottsdale. This was about tolerating Daniel Fisher for 16 years, despite 33 complaints showing systematic racial bias that any reasonable supervisor could see, document, and act upon. This was about 3 supervisors who tried to do the right thing and were blocked by a union that prioritized protecting a bad officer over protecting the public and fellow law enforcement officers. This was about a system that ignored warnings, blocked discipline, and enabled constitutional violations until the cost became impossible to ignore and the victim impossible to dismiss. Chief Robert Thompson paid the price. A decorated police chief with 29 years of service arrested for driving while black. Fisher's career is over. He's in federal prison with a felony conviction. His pension is gone. His name is flagged in the National Decertification Index. The city paid $9 million of taxpayer money. But all of that came after 16 years of ignored warnings, 33 documented complaints, 3 recommendations for termination that were blocked, and a system that protected him until he arrested someone the system couldn't ignore, a fellow police chief. The case became a landmark in police reform discussions and law enforcement accountability. Police academies teach it as a case study in how racial bias can persist even when the victim has law enforcement credentials. Civil rights organizations cite it as evidence that the blue wall of protection extends even to protecting officers who harm other officers when race is involved. Comment if 2 similar complaints should trigger automatic investigation and termination regardless of union contracts. Comment if police unions should be prohibited from blocking discipline for civil rights violations when supervisors recommend termination. Comment if all traffic stop data should be publicly available with demographic breakdowns and officer-specific statistics. And if you believe these stories matter, if you think the system needs fundamental restructuring, if you believe that 33 complaints over 16 years with 3 blocked termination attempts represents catastrophic failure at every level of supervision, then hit that subscribe button. We're exposing departments that ignore documented patterns of constitutional violations. We're demanding accountability not just for individual officers, but for the supervisors who try to remove bad officers but are blocked, the unions that prioritize protecting members over protecting the public, and the systems that enable abuse. This isn't about one officer or one police chief. It's about systems so broken that even a police chief who literally just taught other chiefs about constitutional policing isn't safe from racial profiling. Systems that protect officers with proven track records of bias over protecting both the public and fellow officers.